Hi, this is Jim Baugh with Jim Baugh Outdoors television program. Today we're going to talk a little bit about color grading, matching, and color correction. And going to show you the palette that we came up for our television program we do for about 30 years. And this is also some techniques we use for a lot of our projects, a lot of our production clients. Now, the most important thing about color grading is you need to remember that in pre-production, when you're planning out what you're going to be doing, before you film anything at all, one frame, and certainly before you do any grading whatsoever, first decide on a color palette or grade based on the look you want, and one that accentuates the topic of the content or field footage that was filmed. Now, for example, this is a pretty clear demonstration. It doesn't matter really whether it's film taking in Kansas, or let's say Kentucky, or the Caribbean, or Hawaii. Each one of these types of basic footage that we'd be talking about here, these areas are all going to have pretty radically different color grades. So it's important to know what you're going to be filming and what you want it to look like in the end, and work the grade, the correction, and the color matching accordingly. Okay, let's go. Now, I've taken some shortcuts here that is just going to save us a little bit of time, and I'm not going to go into every single boy, this could take us forever to go through every single adjustment you could do in this grading process and correction. But we're going to go through them here pretty quick. Now, what we've got is, of course, we have our scopes up, and most all the grading I do is I rely heavily on scopes. I do eyeball things, of course, a little bit, but primarily we want to make sure that our color balance, our levels, everything is really where it should be before we start to do any sort of any sort of grading. So we want to make sure that the correction is first, and that's fairly standard. Now, to show you here under our effects rack under Premiere, this is actually a CS6. I've got my own custom folder here. I went through the color correction folder and just pulled out the ones that I know that I'll be using on a constant basis. This is brightness and contrast, fast color corrector, which is a very common one to use, gamma correction, Luma Curve, Rgb color corrector, Rgb Curves, and three-way color corrector. Now, I will not use all of these on a particular clip, but I usually will at least use 2 or 3 of them, depending on what the source clip looks like. So to save time, if we go over to effects control for each clip, I have already preloaded the different palettes that I'm going to be using for correction. And these tools, all of these tools right here, I think on one clip we'll use quite a few, most of them, and pretty much just 2 or 3 on the others. But we'll go ahead and show you our very first clip. You can see there's nothing been done. This is our source, and this is our program monitor. And a lot of times I'll be using a split screen in addition. You don't have to do that, but it just really helps me to reference out what I'm looking at. So very first thing we're going to look at is the fast color corrector. I've already preloaded. You can already see that things have changed here on the program output. And like I said, I will go into split view. I always do it vertical. As you can see here, we've already got a little more contrast going on. Now, since we do an outdoor show, we film from the mid-Atlantic all the way down like to Key West. We're usually around the water. So we have a lot of blues in a whole lot of our scenes. And of course, you can look at the opposite of the color spectrum from blue. You're looking at some of your oranges in here and yellows. And so we're doing highlights to give it a little bit of a warmer look and not so cool. We usually will work in these areas right in here. So the first thing we do is we put up a split view, and we'll just check our white balance, come over here, and whoops, we want the little, there you go. Very good. I always miss that sometimes. Boom, we're gonna hit it. Everything's white and looks very, very good. Now, back to our overall tone here. Now, as we crank this thing up so that you can see, look over here into this window. Now, this is a good way just to check what you're like when you're in the three-way color corrector, or even just here where you're just putting sort of a global little, very faint tint to it. You want to know exactly what you're working at. So I usually bring up the colors. And of course, obviously, we know what you would do in this particular mode. But we're just going to bring this a little bit, just give it a little slight of a wash. It's just barely noticeable, but we'll bring that out a little more in a bit. If we come down to saturation, we're only at saturation at 102%. And we'll show you what it looks like if we really crank that up. As you can see, it looks so much more richer, and it looks, that's actually what we're going to end up looking like, fairly close to that. But we're doing a two-stage color correction, so we don't want it that high at this point. We want it right around 102, 103 is good for right now. Now, the look that we like to get for our color grading and correction for our program is we like crushed blacks, as you can see here. We'll go ahead and we'll take that all the way down to 0. We do not like a flat, washed out look for outdoor program. We don't like really bright, brilliant highlights, but very good contrasty, and crushed blacks is what we like. Output level, so it looks like 100%. We cranked it down a little bit for this particular shot. And then I think that's about it on the very fast color corrector. It's a great little color corrector to do very quick things with. Now, Luma Curve, it's coming up right next. As you can tell, we don't have our standard slight S pattern here. This particular footage was shot on a very inexpensive action cam that we use for very risky underwater filming, because we lose cameras, doing it. So this particular footage is a little blown out because of the type of camera it is. Normally we'd have a little more of an S here for our Luma Curve. You see we did crush the blacks, and you can see how it's affected over here in our window. Really not much else we have done there, but we do use a Luma Curve an awful lot. Three-way color corrector. Now this is a biggie. We use this. Oh, it's just one incredible tool here. We'll start with the highlights, okay? Now, first go back to Luma Curve and double check. Okay. Half the time, I always forget to leave to take my split screen off. Okay, we're back in the three-way color corrector. I just want to look at the split view in this mode, okay? Now, you can see what we're looking at. We got a little more warmth going on here, and you're looking at the differences here. This is your source, and this right here is what we are working with now. On the highlights, again, we went and pulled in here a little bit of this yellow, a little bit of this orange. If I crank up the intensity as much as possible, you can see what it does to the highlight right in here, and all in here. We don't want it that much, of course. But when we have such a blue sky, adding just a little bit of warmth into those highlights is a really big deal. Pretty much the same with the midtones with this shot, because we've got, as you can see, we've got a beach here and some sand with some whatever weeds and seagrass and stuff. And again, we went with the same similar color palette. This is already set for your midtones. Now on the shadows, let me pull this shot down here a little more so that you can see what it looks like. There you go. That's a little further down. Now on the shadows, this is where you can do a lot of different things depending on the look that you are going for. Now, like I said, we're an outdoor program, so our little trick is like we like to bring in the blues in the shadows. We'll come in real quick and we'll punch out. We'll just oversaturate full max, and you see where the shadows are in, all in here. Okay, and what we do is we add this deep blue into our shadow mix to help our overall. Here you can see it here. This is not rendered out yet, of course. That really helps to give us our look that we want. Now here in the three-way color corrector, our master saturation, we did crank it up to about 106. You can see if we just blow it out there, again, you can see that that's actually a little closer to what our final product will look like. But since we're going into Davinci after this, we're going to crank it back down because we're going to use a LUT as a part of our second stage color correction. So we don't want to go too crazy on the saturation. I think that's about it that we do for our particular correction and grade here. And you're looking here at our levels here look good on RGB. And in case you're wondering about our luminosity, our luminance levels, we don't like a super luminant look for our particular program. We try to go for much more of a filmic look, and don't let the levels get too crazy on us. Rgb Curves, this is next. This is right here. It's already right in our clip. And as you can see, we did a little adjustment here. We come into our red, and we probably ought to bring that down just a little bit, just a hair more, okay? And probably bring up the blues just a little. There you go. So we've got a nice balance. And that's about it on the RGB curves. Lastly, brightness and contrast is not something that we use an awful lot. Usually it's not necessary. We've usually corrected it enough by then, but here we're just giving it a little teeny hint of a contrast, and that's it. Let's go ahead and cut out our split view. Now, what you can see here on this very first clip, you can already see the difference between our source and our program. Quite a difference. And again, this is our first stage of color correction and balance and a little bit of grading. Now you can see going into our next shot, now this is on the water shot, it looks quite different. This is looks very flat, not as flat as the third shot. And these are all shot with different cameras, by the way. So that's why what we're going to be doing is we're also, as we're correcting this shot, this second shot here, we're also going to be checking it against our previous shot to make sure that we're really matching the shots well. You don't want it to all look like it's coming out of the same instrument, so to speak. Okay, we've already loaded up here our same tools. We've got our fast color corrector. Let's go ahead and show you what we did to that. Now the RGB curves here are, as you can see, need to be adjusted, but we're not going to get to that quite yet. Very interesting shot, and this is very important. This is a technique, what we do when we really sort of, paint a picture with the color here on a shot like this, and really helps tell our story as far as our color goes. The fast color corrector was very basic. Again, we brought in a little bit of the orange, as you can see here, to the overall. Let me go ahead to the overall picture. Go ahead and split screen in here. You can see it very clearly, how we still got a whole lot of blue in here. And this is just really not much more contrast at all than this very flat, original looking image, which is also on the source monitor. But there's a reason why we're doing this. You see which way the sun is coming and these rays. So we're going to very interesting color correction here and grade. Input levels, again, we've crushed the blacks. If you come down here, you can see we can continue to crush them, but we're not going to do that at this point. We adjusted our output levels down a little bit, as you can see right here. That would be full out at 100%. We're going to bring it all down. Again, we're going for that filmic look. Okay, and that's about it on this particular shot. Doesn't need as much correction as the previous shot because the actual source footage was a little closer to where we wanted it. Now on the Luma Curve, now watch these highlights. This is just wonderful. You see the Luma Curve here. We've crushed down the blacks a little bit, and we'll go ahead and put it in split view. Again, I always like working in split view. Now, let me go ahead and blow out those highlights. See how you lose that definition? We're going to bring it back in. We're going to tighten it up just a little bit, and that's looking pretty good. Go ahead and bring the blacks down just a little. Okay. All right. That looks good at this point. And again, don't worry about these quite yet. We're not at the RGB curves. Three-way color corrector. Now, you can see a huge difference. Let me go ahead and toggle that on and off again. Okay. You can see how we brought in all these colors that are coming in, this sort of, not quite sunset, but this is actually what the color does look like on a day like today, basically where the sun is over the Chesapeake Bay. What we've done on the three-way color corrector is, again, on our highlights, as you can see here, let me go ahead and just crank this up so you can first see exactly where all the highlights are. Just very easy, quick way to do it. Go ahead and bring that back down. So we're putting a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange in there, and that's in the highlight. And then on the midtones, as you can see, we're going to go ahead and blow that up, get a good reference, and bring that right back down. And it gives it that slight little bit of color here off that white on the center console. Now down for our shadows back here, of course, we're going back for that nice blue. That's what we pretty much do on most all of our footage, because there you go. So it shows you where all the images are going to be affected. We're going to bring that back down, bring the intensity back down, but we're just putting a little more of that blue into these shadows. Mask to saturation, I did crank up to 159 here. It needed quite a bit. Actually, I probably will, I think I'll take that down just a little bit, just a hair. And mid-tone saturation, pretty important on this one. Let me go ahead and crank that down. And yeah, we're just trying to bring out the sides of that hull a little bit, right in here. It's looking really actually pretty good. All right, that's about it that's all I want to mess with right now on this particular shot. Rgb Curves, go down there and watch our scopes. As you can see, now that I'll toggle it off, that's off, that's on. I've already corrected it by bringing down the reds and bringing up the blues, and you can look at the shot now. Let me toggle it off again. You see, that's just a little bit too warm. But once we got our scope straight, we're good to go. And then lastly, brightness and contrast. I'm not even sure if I think we said a little bit of contrast here. Yeah, very, very slight. Usually there's not much we need to do, again, on brightness and contrast by the time we finish doing our correction and really this first stage of grading. Now, we go through and look at the shot, and again, as I always love to forget, is to cut off my split screen, which is what we need to do right now. And that was on Luma Curve. I've never been caught on a render with that, but I do usually forget it when I'm working on the material. Okay, now look at the shot. When you're matching, when we're talking about matching, we know the look we're going for. We want to look at our previous shot, get that open a little bit, so we have more of a beach shot, and then we're going to come over and just take a frame of the boat, and look how similar they are. Colors, saturation, everything's looking good. It's looking really good. Now, we get to our third and last shot. Now, in a typical show, we'd have anywhere from, I don't know, 60, 70, and maybe 100 edits. These are only 3. And so you can imagine it does take a little bit of time to do a proper color grade. And this is the first stage. But the second stage goes very, very, very fast. Now, here's a great, great shot. A time lapse. However, it's not graded. See how flat that looks? Oh boy. Yeah, this needs some work. And it's really cool how this turns out. We look over here, we've got again in our palette, the Fast Color Corrector, the Luma Curve 3-way color, Rgb Curves, and the brightness and contrast. So let's first go to our Fast Color Corrector. And let's see what we did. First, we're going to show you a split view. There you go. You can already see it'll bring down the contrast a little bit. I came here into our color wheel and brought in a little bit of, there you go, a little bit of orange to the entire image, because we are going for some very, very soft, warmer tones in the image. Again, because we have so much blue in these shots, and we usually always do. Saturation's already at 138. This was a very, very, very flat image, and that's cranked up to 200. We're going to take it back down to around probably 131, 132 is good. Input, we did crush the blacks a bit, and leaving it output at 100%. And that's it for the fast color correction. On this, just here before we get to the Luma Curve. And the Luma Curve, we crushed the black some more, as you can see. We don't want to take them too far down. We're looking at our scopes. I think it's pretty much good where it was. This is just a very slight S. We bring up our mid-tone highlights, that's going to start to lose it a little bit. And then we have our highs here, and that's looking okay. All right, now the 3-way color corrector. We'll go ahead and toggle that on. Toggle it off and on, and I've already done this preset, and as you can see, it does start to warm things up a little bit. You can see right here in the houses, and again in the highlights, we brought up a little bit of tone. Let me go ahead and get here. We put a little bit of yellow and orange into that sky, which is good. We certainly don't want that much. Very, very careful. These are actually very small adjustments that you do to the to affect the picture. Midtones, again, I went a little deeper into the oranges. As you can see here, that would be too heavy, so we bring it back here. And stereotypically for our grading process, as you can see in the shadows here, we are back down into the blues, okay? As you can see that in some of this water area down in here. We continue to crush a little bit of the blacks here. And mid-tone saturation we set to 138, and shadow ratio is 122. Mass of saturation is right around 136 for this. You can see it all totally blown out, and then put it down here. Okay, and then everything else is pretty much done on the three-way color corrector, and we'll show a split view there. And we'll take that off, and we'll go through and we'll just double check all of our filters here. Fast color corrector goes off, and boom, boom. Rgb curves, very good. It's set. And brightness and contrast, we took down the brightness just to -2, and contrast we kicked it up a little bit to 2. And that is pretty much it. Now, if we look at our clip before that, and this third clip is a time lapse. Everything seems to match pretty good before we go into our second stage of color correction. All right, now all we do now at this point is we would just render it out, which I have already done, and then we go right into Davinci. Now, this is in the color section of Davinci, and what we do here is we're really just applying a final slight grade for a little bit of uniformity for the entire clip, or the actual master film. And here we have it right here. As you can see, we can just scroll through. These are the 3 clips. And we'll play that here just to give you an idea. And by the time we're at this point, the footage we're looking at now doesn't look a whole lot like the original source footage that was rather flat. And look at that time lapse as it goes. So it's very nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our master, and we are going to add a node. Now, there's a whole lot of LUTs here that are available online. You can make your own. I just went through, I've looked at an awful lot of them, and I came up with this Blackmagic. We've used every single one of these, and the Blackmagic 4K film to 709 V2 is the one that really works with our color profile, and I've looked at dozens of them. And you can already see by looking at this, gee, that's a mighty, contrasty, very filmic looking image, and it's actually too much. So what we do is we come under here, and we're going to go to our key output, and you're going to adjust the intensity. And that intensity, we're going to bring it way on down, maybe 350. Let's try it at 331, 431, 365, maybe right around 400. And we'll just take a look. Now, this is not a huge difference, but you can look and see the little more contrast in the midtones. It's just got a bit, the colors pop just a bit more. And these are very minor differences, but it makes a difference in the total finished product. I think we'll crank it just a little bit more. Yeah, right around 413. And we're going to take another look. We're going to come back here. I was thinking the really good thing about using a second stage color correction like this is because if you get a chance to look at your master again, and if you do need to adjust your exposure, your gamma, you can just simply cut the clip up wherever you want and then go in here and adjust anything you want as a final tweak. And I do that from time to time. So although we do most of our color correction, or all of our color correction and grading in Premiere Pro, there are times we'll come in here and do slight gamma corrections. And the other reason is because sometimes shadows are an issue when we're doing interviews and that sort of thing. And you can come in here and do the track matting, and it will just follow somebody's face and that's got a shadow in it, and we can just take that right out. So this is a great, great, great tool to do your final finishing in. Well, at this point, we are going to, I'm happy with that. We're going to save it out. You would just simply go to deliver, and we have done that. Go ahead and save it to your file name, save it out, and that's it. Now we'll take a look at the final product. Tell us what you think in the comments below. Any questions? Let us know. Here we go.